He walked into the gala with her, thinking I wouldn't see. He thought I was just the host, but he forgot I didn't just organize this party. I own the stage, and when I publicly introduced him as my fiancé, it was just the beginning of his complete ruin. The board was set, and he had no idea he was just a pawn. My name is Alara Hayes. At 38 years old, I am the senior vice president of the Equitas Charitable Group, and tonight, every ounce of my focus is on the Equitas Foundation Gala. This is not just a party, it is the absolute pinnacle of New York's philanthropic scene, held annually at the St. Regis, and my professional reputation is staked on its flawless execution. For the last 6 months, I have also been one half of the city's golden couple. My fiancé, Marcus Thorne, 42, and the celebrated founder of Thorne Sustainable Properties, and I are staples of the society pages, lauded for our combined power and, ironically, our profound generosity. But the foundation of that public image has felt brittle lately. Marcus has become strangely distant. The easy intimacy we shared now replaced by rushed phone calls and last-minute cancellations. It is always investor meetings for his ambitious new real estate project. Solara Heights. These meetings are always at night, always urgent, and always just vague enough to arouse suspicion. The first real crack appeared when I was personally vetting the final guest list. A single anonymous payment for 2 seats, traced back to a shell corporation I had never heard of. It was a loose thread, but my instinct told me to pull it. I did not have to pull hard. 2 weeks ago, while fetching a coat for him from our shared walk-in closet, my fingers brushed against a stiff receipt crammed deep in the pocket of a jacket he rarely wore. It was from a high-end jeweler on Fifth Avenue. The purchase date was recent. The item described was expensive. It was not the anniversary gift he had given me the month before. Then came the blatant lie about last week. He claimed to be stuck at his lawyer's office until midnight, finalizing permits for Solara Heights. He looked exhausted and stressed when he finally came home. A performance that was almost convincing. But I check everything. The joint credit card, the one he probably forgets. I monitor meticulously told a different story, a 2-person, obscenely expensive dinner at a dark, romantic restaurant in Soho. My intuition was no longer whispering, it was screaming. I did what any woman in my position, with my resources, would do. I hired a private investigator, the best in the city. The full report landed in my personal, encrypted email exactly 48 hours before the gala. It was brutally efficient, filled with high-resolution photographs that left nothing to the imagination. The woman was Isabella Vance, 34 years old, a financial consultant with a murky reputation and an appetite for expensive things. Marcus had introduced her to me briefly at a cocktail party months ago, dismissing her as just a business associate he was vetting for the Solara project. The photographs showed they were much more than associates. I did not cry. I did not throw a vase. I did not confront him. I simply went numb. And then I got to work. I calmly told Marcus that I needed to be at the hotel extremely early to manage the final preparations for the gala. He looked almost relieved, feigning sympathy for my workload. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that now felt repulsive, and said a sudden work crisis had conveniently popped up. He would catch up later. He promised. So tonight, I stand in the wings of the grand ballroom. My custom-made gown fits like armor. My heart feels like a block of ice. The chandeliers are glittering. The orchestra is tuning up, and I am ready for the performance of a lifetime. For 2 hours, I had played the part of the perfect hostess. I owned the main hall of the St. Regis, moving through the glittering crowd of billionaires, politicians, and old-money philanthropists with practiced ease. I was Alara Hayes, the embodiment of grace and capability, smiling warmly at senators, my handshake firm, my voice a calm, appreciative murmur. I was the very picture of competence, but beneath the polite inquiries about endowment funds and summer homes, I was a predator. My focus was split. While one part of me was charming a major donor, The other was acutely aware of the grand arched doorway. I glanced at the clock. It was 8 o'clock. The party was in full swing. The orchestra was playing, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of power. My stage manager, a meticulous man named David, caught my eye from across the room and tapped his watch. It was time. I nodded, excused myself from a conversation, and began to move toward the side of the main stage, melting into the shadows of the heavy velvet curtains. And that was when he arrived, right on cue, as if I had scripted his entrance myself. The MC was just stepping to the podium, preparing to introduce me for the opening speech, when Marcus Thorne walked in. He was not alone. Clinging to his arm, her laughter sharp and a little too loud, was Isabella Vance. She was beaming, looking around the opulent ballroom as if she had just conquered it. She was draped in a dress so blatantly inappropriate for a high-level charity event, so tight, so revealing that it screamed desperation rather than wealth. It was a statement, and not a subtle one. They did not see me. I stood perfectly still in the wings, watching them through a narrow gap in the curtains. My vantage point was perfect. Marcus looked insufferably smug. His eyes scanned the room, sweeping over the VIP section where I was supposed to be seated, waiting for him. I saw the visible relaxation in his shoulders when he found the table empty. He thought I was running late, or perhaps waiting for him by the door like a dutiful fiancé. He thought he was in control. He put his hand on the small of Isabella's back and began to parade her around the room, introducing her to a few mid-level acquaintances, deliberately avoiding the main dais and the powerful circle of donors I had spent the last hour cultivating. He was showing her off. I took one slow, deep breath. The ice in my veins sharpened my focus. I let the ambient noise of the room fade until all I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart, steady, cold, and ready. I turned to David, who was looking at me with concern. I gave him a single definitive nod. He signaled the MC. The lights in the grand ballroom dimmed, and the orchestra faded into silence. A hush fell over the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice boomed, amplified throughout the hall. "Please join me in welcoming the woman who makes all of this possible. The heart of Equitas, our senior vice president, Ms. Ilara Hayes." I stepped out of the darkness and into the blinding white circle of the spotlight. The room exploded in applause. I smiled, letting my gaze sweep across the 500 faces turned toward me. And then, I locked my eyes onto his. Marcus and Isabella had both looked up instantly at the announcement. Isabella's triumphant smile collapsed into sheer, slack-jawed confusion. But Marcus, his reaction was pure adrenaline to me. The color drained from his face. It was not just the shock of seeing me, it was the shock of where I was. I was not at the door, waiting to catch him. I was not in the crowd, preparing for a confrontation. I was on the stage. I was above him. I was in control. He realized, in that horrific split second, that he had not just walked into a party, he had walked onto my stage. I watched Isabella lean into him, her face pale, whispering something frantic. He did not look at her. He just gave a short, sharp shake of his head, a silent command for her to be quiet, his eyes trapped by mine. The applause began to die down. The room was silent, waiting for me to speak. I let the silence stretch, holding his gaze for one beat, then two. I wanted him to feel the weight of every eye in the room turning from me, the recognized host, to him, the late arrival. Only when I was sure I had his complete, terrified attention did I turn my radiant 1,000-watt smile to the crowd. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice smooth and practiced, projecting effortlessly to the back wall of the grand ballroom. "Welcome to the Equitas Gala." I began my speech, the one I had memorized, the one I gave every year. But this time, I infused it with a new, pointed meaning. I spoke about our mission, about the communities we serve, and the families we lift up. And then I leaned into the theme I had chosen specifically for tonight. At Equitas, I declared, my voice resonating with false sincerity. We believe our work is not just about financial support. It is built on a foundation of something far more precious. It is built on trust. I let that word hang in the air. It is built on transparency. It is built on the profound integrity of knowing that the promises we make are the promises we keep. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus stiffen. He was still frozen near the center of the room, Isabella a shrinking shadow beside him. And, of course, I continued, pacing slowly toward the edge of the stage. This staggering success, this incredible gathering of generous souls tonight, it simply would not be possible without the unwavering personal support from those dearest to our hearts. From our families, our partners, our loved ones. This was the moment. I found David, my stage manager, waiting in the wings. I gave him the signal a slight, deliberate lift of my chin. The effect was instantaneous. A second spotlight, just as bright and powerful as the one on me, snapped on. It did not sweep. It sliced through the dimmed ballroom and landed with brutal precision directly on Marcus and Isabella, isolating them in a harsh circle of white light. A collective, quiet gasp rippled through the audience. 500 heads turned in unison. They were no longer anonymous guests mingling in a crowd. They were a spectacle, trapped in a cage of light for everyone to scrutinize. Isabella's reaction was pathetic. Her hand, which had been curled possessively around Marcus's arm, flew away as if his suit jacket was suddenly electrified. Her face, which had been pale with confusion, erupted in a deep, blotchy crimson. She was utterly exposed, her inappropriate dress and panicked expression drawing every ounce of judgment in the room. She looked exactly like what she was: cheap, tacky, and terrified. I let the suffocating silence hang for 3 long seconds. 4. I wanted them to bake in it. Then I raised my voice, infusing it with a bright, chipper warmth that was pure arsenic. I would like to dedicate a very special, warm round of applause, I announced, my voice echoing with manufactured delight, to my wonderful, supportive fiancé, Marcus Thorne, who has just arrived. A strange, heavy stillness fell over the room. No one knew what to do. This was not on the program. This was bizarre. Then, the obligatory applause began, polite, hesitant, and utterly confused. People were looking at Marcus, then at the mortified woman beside him, then back at me, their faces a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. The air was thick with unspoken questions. I smiled, the picture of a loving, proud fiancé who was just so thrilled to see her man. I stretched my hand out toward him, a grand, welcoming gesture. "Marcus, darling," I called out, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "Don't be shy. Won't you come up here, stand beside me, and say hello to everyone?" It was not a request, it was a command, delivered in front of the most powerful and influential people in New York. He was completely, utterly trapped. If he refused, he looked like a coward and a fool. If he stayed with her, he confirmed the affair in the most public way imaginable. If he came up to the stage, he was acknowledging me as his partner, abandoning her in that circle of light. I watched him make the agonizing calculation. His eyes darted to Isabella, one quick, desperate look that clearly communicated stay put and shut up. He plastered on the most grotesque, forced smile I had ever seen, a rictus of pure panic. He gave her a clumsy pat on the shoulder, a pathetic attempt at a reassurance that failed miserably. And then, taking his first step, Marcus Thorne began the long, lonely walk of shame from the center of the ballroom to my stage. He climbed the 3 steps to the stage, the journey looking as arduous as scaling a mountain. The spotlight followed him all the way, ensuring the crowd watched every strained movement. When he reached me, He leaned in and performed the required gesture. A dry, cold kiss brushed against my cheek. The smile he wore was a grotesque mask, stretched far too wide. "You really know how to make a surprise," he whispered, his voice a low hiss that was meant for me alone, his breath hot and sour with panic. I did not flinch. I kept my brilliant smile fixed on the 500 guests, who were now watching this intimate exchange as if it were a play. "I always do, darling," I whispered back, just as venomously, before turning to the microphone. I grabbed his arm, linking mine through his, and my grip was like steel. He was my prisoner. I felt him try to pull away instinctively, but I held him fast. He was going to stand here, next to me, and listen to every single word. I finished my speech, my voice never wavering, my tone perfectly pitched between philanthropic passion and gracious charm. I spoke about our goals for the next fiscal year, our new initiatives, and all the while, I kept Marcus pinned to my side, forcing him to nod and smile, to play the role of the proud, perfect fiancé to a room full of his peers. The applause when I finished was thunderous, and I raised our joined hands in a gesture of triumphant partnership. He was a prop, and I was using him. We walked down the steps together as the orchestra swelled, the applause following us. The lights came up, and the spell was broken. Guests began to murmur and move. I scanned the room for a split second. As I expected, the harsh circle of light near the bar was empty. Isabella Vance had vanished, predictably slinking off into the darkest corner she could find. The moment our feet hit the plush carpet and we were shielded by a large floral arrangement, Marcus ripped his arm from my grasp. "What the hell are you doing?" He seethed, his face a mottled, ugly red. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fury and genuine terror. I turned to face him, dropping my smile completely. My voice was low and cold, all the fake warmth gone. I am hosting my event. I am raising millions of dollars for children's literacy. The real question is, what the hell are you doing, bringing your mistress to my gala? His mouth opened and closed, a pathetic, gasping motion. He was sputtering, trying to form a lie, trying to find an accusation, but I had left him with nothing. Before he could compose a single coherent sentence, a voice boomed from behind us. "Ilara, my dear, that was a wonderful speech. Truly inspiring." We both snapped to attention. It was Mr. Caldwell, the 65-year-old CEO of Equitas. He is a man of impenetrable ethics, a relic from an older time who genuinely believes in the moral integrity of our work. Marcus immediately tried to recompose his face into a mask of professional calm. I, on the other hand, smiled sweetly, turning to our boss. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. That's so kind of you to say. And look, you know my fiancé." Marcus, good of you to make it," Caldwell said, reaching out to shake his hand. "Marcus just brought a surprise guest tonight." "Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice light and conversational. "A financial consultant named Isabella Vance. She seemed very interested in our operations. Perhaps we should introduce her to the audit committee on Monday. I'm sure she'd have valuable insights." I watched the last remnants of color drain from Marcus's face. He looked physically ill, but he was trapped, his hand still being shaken by Mr. Caldwell. He managed a strained, "A pleasure, as always, sir," while I beamed. "Well, we mustn't keep you," I said, retaking Marcus's arm in an iron grip. "I believe you know the Hamiltons and the Vanderbilts. I simply must show off my biggest supporter." And for the next 30 minutes, I did exactly that. I dragged him on a victory lap around that ballroom. I stopped at every table populated by a major donor. I interrupted conversations with senators. I made a beeline for the oldest, most powerful families in New York. And every single time, I used the same introduction. "Judge Peterson, have you met my fiancé? Marcus. Mrs. Astor, you remember my fiancé. Marcus Thorne. This is my fiancé. He's my biggest supporter. I couldn't do any of this without my fiancé. Fiancé, fiancé, fiancé. With every repetition, I felt his arm grow stiffer. I watched his smile become more brittle, more painful. I was branding him. I was reminding him, and everyone else in that room, exactly who he was supposed to be, even as I was preparing to destroy the man he actually was. Each utterance was another twist of the knife, and I had no intention of stopping. Marcus is sweating under his bespoke suit, my smile the only thing keeping him from bolting. He thinks this is about sex. He thinks this entire excruciating public performance is my petty revenge for him bringing another woman to my event. He is an absolute fool. Isabella Vance, with her desperate dress and panicked eyes, was never the real danger. She was just the final ugly punctuation mark on a story I had already uncovered. My real investigation did not begin 2 weeks ago with a tacky jewelry receipt found in a coat pocket. It began 3 months ago, with numbers. It began with a discrepancy that only I would ever have been in a position to notice. I work for Equitas. My life is built on reputation, and so is our foundation. Our largest donors are not flighty tech billionaires. They are old money families, people who have trusted Equitas with their legacies for generations. They are also, by extension, people who trust me. Marcus knew this, and he counted on it. 3 months ago, during our third quarter internal review, I saw something that felt wrong. It was subtle, buried deep in ancillary reports. Equitas's own funds were secure, untouched. But I have access to the complete donor profiles, and I saw a pattern emerging. 3 of our oldest, most loyal benefactors men in their 70s and 80s had made a series of unusually large concurrent withdrawals from their personal funds. We are talking millions of dollars. The timing of these withdrawals coincided perfectly with the launch of Marcus's ambitious pet project, Solara Heights. He had been pitching it everywhere, promising staggering returns on proprietary green technology. He was leveraging my reputation, using my name and the implied endorsement of Equitas to lend an unearned air of integrity to his venture. He was using my credibility to secure his investments. I did not hire a private investigator. Not for this. I hired someone far more lethal. I made a quiet call to Julian Croft, an old friend from my MBA program who is now one of the most ruthless forensic accountants in the country. I told him I had a potential discrepancy I needed help understanding. Completely off the books. Julian owed me a favor. And more importantly, he despises arrogant men who think they are smarter than everyone else. It took Julian less than a week to confirm my deepest, sickest fears. Solara Heights, the revolutionary project set to redefine New York's skyline. It was a ghost. It existed only on glossy brochures and in a dummy corporation's bank account. Julian found no land deeds. He found no construction permits filed with the city. He found no patents for any green technology. Marcus was running a classic, sophisticated Ponzi scheme. He was using the money from the new investors he was wooing our loyal donors to pay fake, impressive-looking profit dividends to his few early investors, keeping the illusion of success spinning just long enough to secure the next, bigger round of funding. But that was not even the worst of it. The real discovery was the outflow. Marcus was not just churning the money, he was siphoning it. Julian traced millions, a truly staggering sum, being wired out of the country, funneled through a complex web of transfers designed to make it disappear. The money was landing in a series of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. They were held by a single shell corporation. The name of that corporation, IV Consulting, IV. Isabella Vance. That was the moment the ground fell away. That was the moment the ice in my veins truly settled. She was not just a tawdry affair, a midlife crisis cliché. She was the financial architect of his entire criminal enterprise. She was his co-conspirator, the private investigator I hired weeks later. The one who took the photos of them kissing outside that Soho restaurant. That was just a formality. That was just to confirm what I already knew. The relationship was not just criminal, it was personal. He was not just robbing my donors. He was robbing me, using my name to fund his new life with his partner in crime. And tonight, he brought her here. He brought the evidence of his financial and personal treason into my ballroom, and he actually thought I did not know. I finally let go of his arm after we cleared the last cluster of donors. The smile I had been wearing felt like it was carved from stone. He was visibly shaking, his eyes darting toward the main exit. "I've got another surprise for you, darling," I said, my voice just loud enough for him to hear over the orchestra. "It's in the private boardroom, something special just for you." He wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip. "I'm tired. Ilara, I've had enough of this. I think I'm just going to go home." He made a move toward the door, a pathetic attempt to reclaim some control. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. My smile was gone. "Oh, no," I said, my voice hardening. "You are not going anywhere. You are really going to want to see this. It's about Solara Heights." The name hit him like a physical blow. He stopped cold. The fake exhaustion vanished, replaced by the same raw panic I had seen on the stage. He knew. He did not know what I knew, but he knew this was not a social visit. He had no choice but to follow. "This way," I said. Turning on my heel, I led him away from the music and the laughter, through a discreet, paneled door that led to the hotel's private executive suites. We walked down a long, thickly carpeted hallway, the only sound our footsteps. His were hesitant. Mine were steady and deliberate. I stopped in front of a heavy, dark wood door marked Cypress Boardroom. "After you," I said. He pushed the door open, probably expecting an empty room where we could finally have the screaming match he so desperately wanted. But the room was not empty. There was no champagne on ice. There were no celebratory flowers. Sitting around the massive, polished mahogany table, illuminated by the cold, direct light of a boardroom chandelier, were three men: Mr. Harrison, Mr. DeWitt, Mr. Sterling, the three single largest, oldest, and most respected donors to the Equitas Foundation. The three men Marcus had personally defrauded, sitting at the head of the table, his face a mask of grim disappointment, was Mr. Caldwell, and flanking him, holding identical leather-bound portfolios, were two men Marcus had never seen before, but whose sharp suits and sharper eyes screamed legal counsel. They were the two top lawyers for the Equitas Foundation. "Ilara," Mr. Caldwell said, his deep, serious voice cutting through the stunned silence. He did not stand. "You said there was an urgent investment matter that required our immediate attention, a matter of donor integrity." Marcus froze. He was a statue, his hand still on the doorknob. This was it. This was the trap. I could see the gears grinding in his head, the desperate search for an escape route where there was none. He turned to me, his eyes wide and pleading. "Ilara, what is this?" he whispered, trying to pull me back into the hallway. "What are you doing? Let's just talk about this. Just us. Privately." I stepped away from him, moving further into the room to stand beside Mr. Caldwell, aligning myself with the power. I turned to face my fiancé. "No, Marcus," I said, and my voice was as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "There is no more privately. You are going to talk to them." I gestured to the three elderly men watching him with stony expressions. "You're going to talk to them about their $40 million. At that exact same moment, across the hotel in the grand lobby, Isabella Vance was making her move. She had retrieved her coat from the check and was walking briskly toward the revolving doors, her head down, her only thought to escape this nightmare. She was just 3 feet from freedom when 2 uniformed hotel security officers stepped directly into her path. "Ms. Vance," one of them said, his voice polite but firm, stopping her dead in her tracks. Yes, she asked, her voice trembling. Ms. Isabella Vance. The second one confirmed. Vice President Hayes requests your presence at an urgent meeting. Right this way, please. The door to the Cypress boardroom clicked shut behind Marcus, the sound sealing him in. The atmosphere was not one of negotiation. It was an execution. He stared at the three donors, men he had flattered, dined, and charmed. Men who represented the bedrock of New York's old money elite. Mr. Harrison, the eldest and most influential of the three, was the first to speak. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the heavy silence with surgical precision. Our investments, Marcus, he said, his hands folded calmly on the polished table. The ones you personally guaranteed. Where is our $40 million? Where is Solara Heights? Marcus, ever the salesman, tried to rally. He was cornered, but the instinct to lie was stronger than his fear. Gentlemen, Mr. Caldwell, he started, attempting a tone of beleaguered competence. I'm glad Alara gathered us. There have been some unforeseen market fluctuations, some complex regulatory hurdles. He ran a hand through his hair, a practiced gesture of a brilliant mind struggling with mundane problems. These large-scale green energy projects are notoriously complex. Your capital is secure, I assure you. It is just temporarily tied up in legal and zoning issues. It is sophisticated, but it is all under control. Sophisticated, I repeated the word, stepping forward from my position near Mr. Caldwell. The binder in my hand felt heavy. I dropped it on the table. The thud was definitive, a gavel striking down his lies. It was 100 pages thick. Is this what you call sophisticated? Marcus, I asked, my voice dangerously low. I flipped open the binder. Or perhaps the regulatory hurdles are these wire transfers, the ones routed through Grand Cayman. I turned another page, and these, the final destinations, numbered, non-jurisdictional accounts in Switzerland. I tapped the spreadsheet my forensic accountant had so beautifully prepared. This is not a construction delay, Marcus. This is not market fluctuation. These are bank statements. These are international transfer receipts. This is a detailed ledger of your theft. He stared at the documents, his eyes darting frantically between the columns of numbers he thought no one would ever see. The color drained from his face, leaving a sick, waxy sheen. Sweat began to bead on his forehead and upper lip. He looked up at me, the performance utterly shattered, leaving only the terrified, hollow man beneath. How? He whispered, his voice cracking. How did you get this? You were spying on me. The audacity of that question, the accusation in his voice, snapped the final thread of my icy control. Spying, I shouted, the sound echoing off the wood-paneled walls. The lawyers at the end of the table sat up straighter. I was protecting my foundation. I was protecting these men. You stood by my side. You used my name. You leveraged the reputation I have spent my entire life building. You used the trust of these good men who have supported Equitas for decades, and you stole their money. I was breathing hard, my entire body thrumming with adrenaline and a rage I had kept locked down for months. You did not just betray me, Marcus. You betrayed every person in that ballroom. You betrayed the very idea of this foundation. Marcus shrank back, his eyes wide, as if I had physically struck him. The room fell silent again. Mr. Caldwell, who had been watching this with the grim patience of a judge, placed his hands flat on the table and leaned forward. Marcus, he said, his voice the final nail in the coffin. This is not a personal dispute. This is large-scale, systematic fraud. You have used the name and the events of Equitas to actively target and defraud our most loyal donors. This is the end. As of this moment, your association with this foundation, and, I suspect, with any reputable institution in this city, is permanently over. Marcus looked at Caldwell. He looked at the donors. He looked at the binder. Then he looked at me. I could see the final, horrifying calculation dawn on his face. He had not just lost the money. He had not just lost his reputation. He had not just lost me. He was going to prison. He was finished. The evidence was irrefutable. The donors were his judges, and the lawyers were his executioners. I saw the look in his eyes change, the panic of a trapped animal morphing into the viciousness of a cornered one. If he was going down, he was going to claw at anyone he could reach. He was going to drag me down with him. Marcus spun around, his face slick with sweat, and pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at me. "She knew," he screamed, his voice cracking and echoing in the boardroom. "She knew everything. Alara is my accomplice." The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It was a different kind of quiet, not just shock, but the heavy, suffocating weight of confusion. I saw it on their faces. Mr. Caldwell's brow furrowed, his gaze shifting to me with a new, unwelcome flicker of doubt. Mr. Harrison and the other donors, who had just been my staunchest allies, now looked at me with cautious, reassessing eyes. Marcus saw the shift, too, and he pounced on it. "She gave me the access," he shouted, his voice gaining a desperate, hysterical strength. "How do you think I knew which of you to approach? How do you think I got the private financial profiles? She helped me. She knew everything. She benefited from the money. 2. We were in this together." The men looked at me, waiting. The lawyers looked at me, their faces carefully, professionally blank. This was his last, desperate play to muddy the water, to make me a co-conspirator, to turn my own evidence against me. I held his gaze. I did not cry. I did not protest. I remained terrifyingly calm. "That," I said, my voice clear and cold, "is a desperate lie." Marcus let out a short, ugly laugh. "Oh, is it? Alara a lie," he sneered, taking a step toward me. "Then tell them. Tell us all. How did you get this?" He slapped his hand on the binder I had brought, the one filled with his secret accounts. "How did you get the offshore transfer data? How did you get the account numbers in Switzerland? You do not just stumble upon that information unless you are already on the inside. You were in it with me from the beginning." He turned back to the jury. "Prove it. Alara," he demanded. "Prove you were not." As if summoned by his challenge, the heavy boardroom door swung open. It was not a subtle entrance. 2 of the St. Regis's uniformed security officers stepped into the room, and standing between them, her face pale and blotchy, was Isabella Vance. Her eyes were red and wild with panic. She looked at Marcus, then at me, then at the panel of stone-faced men, and then at the lawyers. She instantly understood this was not a meeting. This was in tribunal. Marcus's jaw went slack. "Isabella!" But Isabella, reading the room, saw only one thing: her own imminent destruction. And she immediately decided to save herself. She ripped her arm away from the guard and pointed a shaking finger at the man she had arrived with. "He's lying!" she shrieked, her voice high and trembling. "He told me Alara was the mastermind. That's what he said." This was a twist I had not anticipated. "He told me," she continued, the words spilling out in a desperate sob, a performance for the men at the table. "He told me Alara came up with the whole plan, that she was sick of the foundation and wanted to launder the charity money through his project. He said she was the only one who knew the donors well enough to pull it off. He said she was using him to do it." The room descended into a low chaos of accusations. Marcus was staring at Isabella, gaping, speechless at her immediate, savage betrayal. The donors looked utterly bewildered, caught in this he said, she said of 2 obvious criminals. Marcus just sneered. "See, it is all a mess. You cannot prove a thing." I remained perfectly still. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Isabella. "So, I was the mastermind?" I asked quietly. I reached into the small beaded clutch I had carried all evening and pulled out my phone. I held it up. "The problem with amateurs," I said, addressing the room, "is that they are too arrogant to be quiet." I pressed the play button on an audio file. My voice filled the room, but it was different, clipped, professional, with a faint Swiss accent I had practiced. "Ms. Vance, I appreciate you taking the call. As I said, my client is prepared to move $20 million, but he is concerned about discretion. Specifically, he is concerned about Mr. Thorne's fiancé, Elara Hayes. She is very high profile at Equitas. Is there not a significant risk of her discovering the arrangement?" Then, Isabella's voice. Not the sobbing, hysterical voice of the woman in the room, but the voice she had used 3 days ago, a voice that was smug, condescending, and brimming with confidence. "Oh, please." The recording of Isabella laughed. "Elara, that is the best part. She is the perfect cover. Marcus has her completely snowed. She is so naive, so focused on her good works. She thinks he is a genius. And the donors? Well, they are just a bunch of old fools who trust him because he is engaged to her. He is brilliant. He has got them all wrapped around his little finger. She will not suspect a thing until we are on a beach and she is left holding the bag." I pressed stop. The recording ended. The sound of Isabella's recorded voice, so smug and arrogant, faded into an oppressive, heavy silence. The boardroom felt like a vacuum. Isabella Vance herself did not make a sound. She simply collapsed. Her legs buckled, and she crumpled into one of the heavy leather chairs, her hands flying to her face as a dry, tearing sob of pure, abject defeat ripped through her. Marcus was immobile, his face a ghostly white, as if he had been struck by lightning. He looked completely hollowed out, the last shred of his blustering arrogance vaporized by the undeniable proof of his own partner's contempt for him. I slowly lowered my phone, slipping it back into my clutch as if it were a weapon I no longer needed. I let the silence stretch, forcing every person in that room to witness their complete and total ruin. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice sharp and clear, cutting through the stillness. "Gentlemen, I trust that recording makes it abundantly clear who in this situation is the naive victim and who is the calculating criminal. Mr. Caldwell," his face a mask of righteous fury, gave a single definitive nod to the 2 lawyers at the end of the table. He did not need to say a word. The signal was given. I turned my full attention from the weeping woman in the chair and centered it on the man I had once planned to marry. I felt nothing. The rage had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, efficient void. "You have 2 choices, Marcus," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of all emotion, as if I were discussing a minor budget adjustment. As I spoke, one of the lawyers, the senior one, stood up. He moved with a quiet, predatory grace and placed a thick, leather-bound document on the table, directly in front of Marcus. He placed a heavy, expensive fountain pen neatly beside it. "Option 1, I continued, "is you sign this confession, right here, right now." I tapped the cover of the document. "It is a full and complete admission of your guilt, your methodology, and your conspiracy with Ms. Vance. It also contains an irrevocable asset transfer agreement. It liquidates every single thing you own. Your personal accounts, your business holdings, and yes, the numbered accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands that you thought were so clever." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Those funds will be immediately seized and wire transferred as full restitution to Mr. Harrison, Mr. DeWitt, and Mr. Sterling. Furthermore, this agreement includes a specific clause, drafted by these very talented gentlemen, terminating and forfeiting any and all of your claims to the penthouse we co-own. You will walk out of this room tonight with absolutely nothing but the clothes on your back." I let that sink in. "That," I said, "is option 1. Option 2, I said, holding up my phone again, "is you refuse to sign." And I texted the district attorney. "You see, The DA's office is a major beneficiary of Equitas's public safety initiatives. They are very good friends of this foundation, and they are, as we speak, waiting in their office tonight. They have already been alerted to a potential major fraud case that might break during our gala. All it takes is one message from me. I will send them this audio file. I will send them the 100-page forensic report from my accountant, and you will not be walking out of this hotel. You will be arrested in this boardroom, escorted in handcuffs through the lobby, right in front of the press that is still downstairs covering my party. You will be charged with wire fraud, conspiracy, and grand larceny, and you will lose everything anyway, right before you spend the next 10 to 15 years in a federal prison. He stared at the document, then at me, his eyes wide with a horror that was almost satisfying. You, he whispered, his voice cracking. You planned this, all of it, the stage, the lights, this room. You planned all of this. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt only disgust. Do not mistake your arrogance for my strategy. Marcus. You planned this when you chose to lie. You planned this when you chose to steal. You planned this when you decided to use my name, my reputation, and my friends to fund your pathetic little life. This is not a plan. This is a consequence. This is simply the bill coming due. I then turned my gaze to the woman who was trying to disappear into the chair. And you. Ms. Vance, I said, my tone dismissive, as if speaking to an insect. You get the same choice. You are the financial architect. You are a co-conspirator. You are looking at the exact same prison sentence. Or you can become our star witness. You cooperate fully. You testify against him. You turn over every file, every password, every last piece of evidence you have. In return, I will ask Mr. Caldwell to recommend the district attorney consider you a cooperating witness rather than a primary defendant. So, what is it? Are you his accomplice, or are you his executioner? The choice, if you could even call it that, was instantaneous. Isabella, seeing her entire future dissolving into a federal indictment, completely broke. She lunged forward, her voice a desperate, ugly wail. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything, she sobbed, the tears now genuine tracks of terror on her face. He has other accounts, ones you do not know about. He has a safe deposit box under a different name. I have the passwords. I have all of it. I will give you everything. Just please, please do not let me go to prison. Please help me. She was no longer a seductress or a financial architect. She was just a cornered animal, and she was viciously, immediately, turning on her mate to save her own skin. I did not even look at her. I turned my full attention back to Marcus. There was nothing left. Isabella's recorded voice had been the poison. Her live, screaming betrayal was the dagger. He was a dead man, and all that was left was the burial. He stared at the fountain pen on the table, then at the confession, then back at the pen. His hand, the one that had held mine, the one I thought would hold my hand for the rest of my life, was shaking so violently he could barely uncap it. One of the lawyers, in a gesture of profound procedural boredom, nudged the document an inch closer to him. Marcus looked up at me. It was his last, pleading look. He was not searching for love. I knew that. He was searching for a single tiny shred of the naive Ilara he thought he knew, an ounce of pity. He found nothing but the reflection of his own ruin in my cold, steady gaze. He picked up the pen. The scratching sound of the nib on the thick, expensive paper was the only sound in the room. It was louder than an explosion. He signed the confession. He signed the full, irrevocable asset transfer. He signed away his percentage of the penthouse, his shares, his phantom Solara Heights Corporation. He signed away every dollar in the Caymans and every franc in Switzerland. He signed, and he signed, and he signed, under the watchful, impassive eyes of the Foundation's legal team. When the last signature was complete, the senior lawyer quietly closed the portfolio. Mr. Caldwell gave a short, curt nod to the two security guards who had been standing silently by the door. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Vance, if you will come with us," one of the guards said, his voice polite but unyielding. They were not arrested. Not tonight. That was not the deal. The deal was a clean, civilized execution. The guards flanked them, and they were escorted out, not through the gala, but down the hall to a private service elevator. They would be taken down to the loading bay, where another legal team, one representing the donors, and one from my personal financial office, was waiting in a series of Blacktown cars to oversee the immediate, irreversible, and overnight transfer of every single liquid asset. The boardroom door clicked shut, leaving us in the sudden, heavy silence of the aftermath. Mr. Harrison, the oldest donor, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for an hour. He looked across the table at me, his eyes tired but filled with a profound, almost paternal gratitude. "Ilara, my dear," he said, his voice thick, "you did not just save our money. You saved our names, our legacies. To be fooled, at our age, it is a terrible thing. You saved us from that shame." Mr. Caldwell stood up, his face grim but deeply respectful. "Ilara," he said, "thank you is an insufficient word. You saved the Equitas Foundation tonight. Its reputation is infinitely more valuable than its endowment. You did the right thing, the hard thing, and you did it with absolute precision." I nodded, allowing myself one single, steadying breath. I smoothed the front of my custom gown, not because it needed it, but because I needed to anchor myself back into the woman I was, the senior vice president. "No one," I said, my voice finally my own again, "gets to exploit Equitas. Not on my watch. Not ever." I left them in the boardroom to manage the mechanics of the victory. I walked back down the long, carpeted hallway, the faint thrum of the orchestra growing louder with every step. I pushed open the paneled door and stepped back into the party. It was as if I had stepped between worlds. The music was bright. The orchestra was playing a swing tune. People were dancing, laughing, their faces flushed with champagne and celebration. The air was warm and vibrant. No one had noticed I was gone. No one had any idea that a multi-million-dollar fraud had been dismantled and 2 lives had been surgically ended just 20 yards away. I did not stop. I did not get a drink. I walked straight through the crowd, my purpose clear, and mounted the steps to the main stage for the second time. I walked directly to the microphone and held up my hand to the band leader. He saw me, his face a mask of confusion, but he signaled his musicians. A saxophone note died in a sad little squeal. The dancing slowed, the chatter faded. 500 faces turned, once again, to look at me. I gave them the most radiant, the most genuine, the most triumphant smile of my entire life. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, my voice bright and clear, full of joy. "I am so sorry to interrupt the dancing. I really am." I gave a little laugh. "But I have the most wonderful, unexpected news." A low murmur of excitement went through the crowd. "It seems that just moments ago, we received a truly massive, last-minute, anonymous donation." I savored that word. "A donation so incredibly generous that I am thrilled to announce we have not just met our fundraising goal for tonight, we have completely, utterly shattered it." The room exploded. The applause was deafening, a roar of pure, unadulterated joy. People were cheering, whistling, stomping their feet. I saw a waiter passing with a tray, and I plucked a fresh glass of champagne. I held it high, not to the crowd, but to the glittering chandeliers above. I had lost a fiancé. Yes, but I had saved my career. I had protected my friends, and I had delivered my own perfect justice. All before the last song, at my very own gala. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I would love to know your thoughts, so please comment down below and tell me where in the world you are listening from. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.